Today's build is going to be for some frogs I purchased as tadpoles back in December from Frog Daddy. Phyllobates Aurotaenia are a smaller species of Phyllobates, reaching only about 2/3 the size of a Terribilis. The enclosure for this build is a Repti Zoo 45-gallon knockdown terrarium. Now, since this is a knockdown and it's not factory sealed, I did have to go around in the beginning and use some silicone to make sure that I closed up all the edges so I didn't get any water leakage. Now, to start the build, I went with obviously the larger Hardscape pieces first, holding them in place with the hot glue gun, and then going back over it with silicone and cocoa cord. Now, I've mentioned this in the past, but it is worth noting that the hot glue is just there to temporarily hold these pieces together. You really want to make sure you use a good amount of silicone to hold the pieces to the glass permanently. I generally don't like cork bark pieces that are cut straight like this, but in this case it worked out pretty well. Something I forgot to show here was that I plan on using the open end of this cork bark tube as a planter, so I've stuffed some filter mat down inside the hole, only about 1/4 of the way in, just to hold the substrate up. I also stuffed filter media inside both ends of this tube, but that's only because I don't want the frogs to go inside there. Since I don't really plan out exactly what pieces of hardscape I'm going to use, I found it easier to just start filling in these gaps with the small pieces, just in case I do cover it up with another large piece and make it impossible to get behind there to fill the gaps in. Here I'm just using a scrap piece of XPS foam board to hold this piece up. And just to make sure nothing slid around during the build, I went ahead and just siliconed everything into place. Now, to get this piece to fit on as nicely as it did to the other cork bark tube, I had to break a few pieces off. I then used those pieces to hide that seam better than just using straight cocoa cord. When I'm covering up the silicone and seams like these, I really like to pile on the cocoa fiber so I can really press it down inside the silicone. This part here I wasn't too sure of, and it actually kind of just sag a bit, which later on you'll see I had to put a piece of driftwood underneath it, but it actually held on so well that it started to pull the other piece off with it. And now that the hardscape was done, I let everything sit overnight just to make sure it stayed in place when I started putting the background pieces on. And here I'm just using sheets. It's much easier than using the pieces. Unfortunately, I've only got 1-inch thick pieces right now, and most of the distributors are out of 2-inch thick pieces unless you want to overpay for it. Now, since the 1-inch pieces are a little bit thin for my liking, I went around and just randomly placed some more 1-inch pieces over top. Once I had all the background pieces up, I let it set again overnight just to make sure when I went around and carved things out and tried to blend in those extra pieces that I wouldn't accidentally rip the background off. It is a little rough in the beginning, but once you get used to the amount of pressure you need to put on the screwdriver or whatever tool you're using, it goes pretty quick, as you can see here. Now once I'm done carving, I will let this sit out for a week just to make sure everything is cured properly, and then I'll go over it a few times over a couple days and rinse everything down. Now once I was satisfied with the wash down, I went and started putting in the drainage layers. The first layer of filter foam I'm putting down here is a 20 ppi, and followed by that is a 40 ppi, which will still let the water drain through but also acts like a substrate barrier. I know the gaps between the sheets look a little wide, but once I get the substrate down, there's really no danger of the frogs getting down in between there. And even if they did, there's nowhere for them to go. Once the drainage layer was complete, I could go ahead and start filling in everything with the substrate. Here I'm filling in behind this tube, which I found a big void, so I definitely don't want the frogs going down there. And I also went around and filled in all the areas that I was going to use as planters. Once I was done with the substrate, I went around with wet sphagnum and filled in any gaps I found. It's also obviously a great place to plant moss and other epiphytes, but it also helps maintaining humidity inside your vivarium. Now, starting with the background, I'm going to use the rest of my philodendron mini. It's a nice plant that stays small and compact just like it is now, but it will eventually spread. Next up is the Monstera siltepecana. This is kind of a fast grower. I really like the leaf sizes, and it actually does get pretty big as it matures. Now here you notice the aerial roots, I am not pressing them into the substrate. Next up is the lemon button fern. This one you kind of got to be careful with because it propagates by runners and it will overtake your terrarium. Here is an emblementha. I'm not sure which variety it is. You also notice that it was formerly known as Lobesia. Next up is Sonorilla Thailand. This is a really popular plant in terrariums and vivariums because it loves the humidity. Now over top of that, I'm going to put this Rhaphidifolia tetrasperma. The leaves get kind of big and they'll actually help and shade this Sonorilla out a bit. This is one of my favorite anthuriums here. It'll get some nice big heart-shaped leaves and it really enjoys the high humidity. And just like all other aroids, you don't want to bury the base of the stem in the substrate or the air roots because they will rot out. Another great background plant, the Ficus pumila. This will cover as much as your tank as you want it to in a relatively short amount of time. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name of this begonia, and I'm typically not a fan of begonias, but I do like the leaf structure on this and the color, and it will umbrella out as it grows. The Solanum ecuador is a really nice vivarium plant. The leaves stay really small compared to a lot of the other Solanum species, and once it gets established, it will grow pretty quick. Now, one thing I've learned to help this plant establish really quickly is to just bury the ends lightly, don't pack it down. It'll help it root faster and keep it moist, less chance of it drying out. Now, once all the planting's done, I'm going to go around with the Christmas moss It seems to grow really well. And to help this plant establish itself really quick, you really need to keep the humidity high in your terrarium. Another benefit to moss is that when it does start to really establish and spread out, it can also help in keeping humidity levels up in your terrarium. And here's just a quick shot of the cleanup crew, some dwarf whites and springtails. I took this picture kind of late, so most of the big ones buried themselves. Once the planting's complete, I like to take the mister and really give it a good soaking. And once I did that, I realized I forgot the bromeliads, so I went around and just added my random broms I have in my grow out bins. I really don't know the species or the varieties of any of these. There's just so many out there. Now, the last step is leaf litter. Of course, I'm starting out with the live oak leaf litter. And once I have a good thick base of that down, for some extra texture, put some willow leaves down. I've been using these more and more in my terrariums. And of course at the end here, put down our magnolia leaves. Frogs really love hiding underneath these. And now I'm going to add in my botanicals. You can tell I gave it another misting just to keep the plants moist. I think this was another variety pack I grabbed from Frog Daddy. Now once the botanicals are in, I like to give it another good soaking just to get everything going. And after that, I just let it sit for a month and get ready for the frogs. At this point in time, these guys are about 2.5, almost 3 months out of water. I still find it funny how hard it is to get these out of your bins, and then almost equally as hard to get them off your hand. But I really enjoy this part. I don't think I mentioned this in the beginning, but I did get 5 tadpoles. I know I could probably fit some more in here just because they are smaller, but I could probably wait just to see how these guys do in here. And just some interesting info I thought I'd pass along about these frogs is that these are actual true poison dart frogs, meaning that they are one of the species that was used to poison dart tips by some of the tribes in Colombia. Now, just in case you're wondering, the other 2 are the Phyllobates bicolor and Phyllobates terribilis. Now, even though those 3 species have the same toxins present, the terribilis is still the king of them all. That's a wrap on this video. I really appreciate watching, especially up to this point. And make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.